Welcome to the Startup Leader Show, where we learn lessons from leading startup founders and executives. I'm your host, Lisa Dreher. I'm excited to introduce our guest for today, Scott Bright. He's the CEO of Jeeva Wireless. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me, and May the 4th be with you.
Oh my gosh, what a perfect day, right? So maybe we can start by having you just give us a little bit of background on yourself and Jeeva Wireless.
Sure, happy to. I'm Scott Bright, CEO here at Jeeva Wireless. I'm an electrical engineer by training, background in product development, doing consumer and medical devices for most of my career, and now with a spin out from the University of Washington doing ultra low power wireless for IoT connectivity.
Wow, and there's more and more IoT devices every day, right?
The world is becoming increasingly connected, and as we see it, about to run into a roadblock, which is it's increasingly challenging to get small form factor, tiny cost. Power dissipation is a huge challenge, and we have a transformative technology that enables most of those things to become non-issues.
That's great. So when you think about some of the trends that are happening in the IoT market, can you kind of expand on what you were just saying?
Sure. One of the sort of ugly truths of IoT connectivity is it's hitting a roadblock. As Moore's law continues to advance, things like machine learning and AI and processing horsepower, the analog technologies of energy storage, battery chemistry, and low power radio are only making small incremental advances. And so these things are getting farther and farther apart. And the big roadblock to continuing growth of IoT is power, and specifically batteries and replacing them often. So Jeeva's solution for backscatter solves that by using reflected RF energy to encode and transmit data so that things in places that were never before possible can now become connected to the internet.
Wow, that's really exciting. So what are some of the things that business leaders need to keep an eye on, as this kind of comes into reality?
Well, as with any new technology, the big challenge is kind of imagining something that has never been. And it takes a bit of a beginner's mindset, being willing to step back and look at the problem from new perspectives. And so that's a big part of my daily challenge is helping our customers envision what could be possible rather than extrapolating from what's been done in the past.
Okay. Well, we'll have to learn more about that. But we invited you here today to talk a little bit about your experience in building and growing startups. And, we can talk about Jeeva and maybe some of the other experiences you've had over the years. I know you've been involved in several startup organizations over the years. And I just want to start by asking, what have been some of the biggest keys to your business success so far?
Well, I guess I might be tempted to caveat that question just a little bit at the beginning to say that I think success is in the eye of the beholder. And in my opinion, too often it's easy to spend time chasing others' definition of that. So I think for me, it's important to start with defining success, making it a personal definition, deciding what's important upfront to you, to your organization. I'm a huge fan of codifying core values, writing them down, using them as guardrails for when things get crazy. Outside influences, advice, popular trends, they can be informative, but for me, if it doesn't pass the sort of internal belief test, it's okay to say, well, that's not for us. I guess secondly, I would say that if you can't improve what you can't measure, dashboards, key metrics, these are really valuable tools. And as a startup, it's often tempting just to use anecdotes to guide your understanding of how things are going. But they're not only valuable as a milestone in real time, but also as a look back roadmap, as motivation. For example, training with a heart rate monitor allows you to say, am I really working hard right now? Or does it just feel like that because I didn't really eat very well yesterday? But also you can look back a year ago and say, well, I used to do this run in these many hours, and now I can do it this many minutes faster. And that's motivation to like, oh, well, maybe I could do a little bit better. And so I'm a big fan of picking a North Star metric, measuring it, codifying it, tracking it, referring to it often, and using that rather than just like, anecdotes.
Wow, that's a really interesting perspective, because I think that a lot of times, especially in startups, you always hear people talking about, oh, we have shiny object syndrome. We're chasing whatever the next hot thing is all of the time and not staying focused on what we are really trying to accomplish as a team.
Yeah, I think it's also kind of important to be willing to accept the beginner's mindset. The farther you get in your career, it's sort of a natural tendency to spiral into your own comfort zone, doing what you already know how to do well. But the gains that can come from learning something new, from being willing to start over in a field that you don't really know, they can have unexpected crossovers and raise your game in ways that you didn't think were possible. And so it's a big challenge, particularly as you kind of go down that career path, to be willing to step back and say, I'm going to try something I've never done before. But in my experience, it's humbling and also super valuable in the long run.
That is so true and so much fun. I've completely experienced that as well. And even to the point where you almost feel your brain just expanding when you're learning something new like that. So I think it is really challenging, but also really fun. And I just want to point out that if you're measuring your runs in hours, yeah, I'm impressed. You must be doing marathons or
everything's relative.
super marathons.
There's always somebody who's way out there that you think is really the pinnacle, and then they have someone that they're looking to as the pinnacle. So it's all relative.
Yeah, no doubt. So in any case, what would you say has been the most valuable business lesson you've learned over the years?
Well, I guess I would summarize it as stuff goes wrong. How your organization reacts to stuff going wrong is the important bit. Mistakes are not necessarily failures. Fear of making mistakes can easily be a real failure. And I find it helpful to remind myself it's okay to try things that might not work. I just want to try and balance the learning opportunity with the progress bar. And occasionally 2 steps back to make forward progress is the right call. But the most important part is to own the mistakes, to share the outcome, let others learn from the process, demonstrate resiliency, allow the entire org to be a learning organization by sharing what works and what doesn't. And for me, in my experience, for this to happen in a business setting, there has to be trust between all of the participants who are involved. And trust is more easily built when friendship and camaraderie are part and parcel of the working environment. I sort of disagree with this notion that there must be a rigid boundary between personal relationships and business relationships. I believe that close personal relationships belong in the business world. And that's not to say you need to share everything with everyone, because personal privacy also has a place and everyone deserves the right to define their own boundaries. But when I'm working with people whom I consider to be my friends, I'm more open. I'm more likely to share the ups and downs. I'm more likely to accept help and to give it in return. Coworkers should be friends, because that's how you build resiliency. And it's up to a leader to foster an environment where that's not only possible, but likely.
Yeah, I think that everybody, I don't know too many people that wouldn't really prefer to work in an environment like that. Absolutely. I think people are a lot more inspired and excited to come to work every day.
I agree. And, if you think about where you spend your time just in terms of hours, work, then sleep, then everything else. Why not, do all you can to make that big chunk of time as enjoyable as possible and with friends and an environment that you cherish.
Gosh, without a doubt. So, kind of, I guess, leapfrogging off that, what is it that, kind of knowing what you know now, what would you have told your younger self or your earlier startup building self?
Well, I have two teenagers, so I'm keenly aware of the futility of providing advice from the older generation. So I'm not sure I would accept this, but I would tell myself to try not to stress too much. Sleepless nights don't help anything. They only hurt. Stress detracts from energy. Stress is a choice. And I would remind myself that you're always in control of your reaction to events. Often in hindsight, I think some of the biggest growth opportunities come from facing adversity. In a creative endeavor, it's often the constraints that guide the creativity and ultimately foster the breakthrough outcomes. I mean, if you think about it, if you could do anything and still succeed, you would choose the path of least resistance. That makes the most sense. So why choose the hard path? Well, I think that there's some truth to this Stoic philosophy of the obstacle is the way. My experience is that when I've been on the hard path, I'm more likely to be on the right path. There will always be moments of doubt, maybe even a few moments of despair. But in living the core virtues of courage and moderation and always trying to seek justice and wisdom, even in failure, if it was done on the terms you can live with afterward, that's a success. So when I'm in moments of doubt, I like to think about my future self. Will I be proud of how I acted now in this moment of turmoil? And that's not always been true. I can look back on my past and see times when I wish I would have acted in a manner that I would be more proud of today. But I take that as a learning opportunity and I use it to inform how I move forward from here on, which is the only choice you really have. So today I like to focus on this mantra that it's okay to try your best and fail, but looking back on a success and thinking you could have led by a more virtuous path, that won't feel good.
That is really good. That's good life advice. That's not only good business advice.
Well, it's not mine. I mean, this is stuff I've learned from others, and there is some wisdom out there that is worth taking a moment and seeking it.
Hopefully, your kids are listening to that just a little bit.
Maybe someday.
Yeah, probably when they have their own kids, right? Yeah, right. So is there anything that looking back that if you were to start all over that you would have done differently?
Well, I would certainly tell myself, again, going back in the past, I would say, that stock investment that just doubled, don't sell that. Hold on to that. I think I would try to be kinder to myself. If I were to start all over. When I was younger, I thought about, being tough on myself as a virtue. And now I kind of feel like it's no more fair to be hard on yourself than it is to be unnecessarily hard on others. I always try to be as compassionate to myself as I would to my friends and my loved ones. I don't allow that inner critic voice to dominate. I'm trying to learn to live in harmony with it, treat it like an old friend who can be disagreeable at times, but as much as possible with a grain of salt. And in the grand scheme of things, life will go on. So try not to worry too much. It's all gonna be okay.
Yeah. That's, again, really good advice. So one of the things that we hear a lot from startup founders and leaders is that a lot of times their business will hit these plateaus, and pushing through those plateaus can be a challenge. How have you, kind of what have been your successful ways of pushing past those plateaus?
Yeah. I think this kind of comes back to what I was saying a little earlier about the beginner's mindset and being willing to fail. Um, you know, uh, and spiraling into your comfort zone. What has worked in the past is not necessarily indicative of what will continue to work in the future. Um, you see that little disclaimer when you're investing in a mutual fund, and past performance is not a guarantee of future outcome. Just like that's a truth. And when plateaus happen, often it's because something has changed. So go back to the fundamental assumptions and retest them. Every business model and plan is built on some key assumptions. And if you don't continually re-examine them, they'll be different in the future than they were when they were written down. So be willing to test, those assumptions. Hopefully they were codified and written down so you can refer back to them. And hopefully there's something that's measurable so you can, outside of, a feeling or an emotional response, you can like put a number to it that's, that's empirical. But I think that's really the key, is being willing to, understand what's changed and adapt, and not be afraid of trying something new. And just go back to that, test, evaluate, iterate. Pivot is a good, it's often overused and sometimes misused, but it's sometimes what's necessary. And I think back to the beginning of 2020, when our company was focused on connected entertainment venues as a primary market, cruise ships and hotels and casinos, and like in my life, I've never seen a market dry up as fast as that happened in March of last year.
Yeah.
So like that could have been like not only a plateau, that could have been a complete crash. So we were quick to realize that life has changed and it's not changing back anytime soon. So back to the drawing board, and thankfully we're still here to fight another day.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I think a lot of us had to redefine where our businesses were going over the last year and a half, I guess.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's also been opportunities that are new that weren't there before. So I think we're one of the lucky ones, in that the COVID pandemic highlighted some challenges that exist in the supply chain, and we think we have an interesting technology to help fulfill those challenges.
Right. So actually, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, because I think that, looking to the future, there's so much happening right now. And like we talked about earlier, we see everything kind of getting connected right now. But, what have you seen as some of the biggest progress leaps that Jeeva Wireless has made recently?
Well, so I guess news for us, we're really proud of this. We've been working for some time on a new semiconductor chip, and just recently we're announcing the release of this first chip. It is the world's lowest power wireless chip for streaming sensor data, and this consumes 1,000 times less power than Bluetooth, and can stream real-time data at double the range of today's RFID technologies. So we're pretty excited to be working with some of the biggest names in consumer electronics and Internet of Things to eliminate batteries and provide data from things and places that were never before possible. But as I think about sort of the bigger scope of your question, the pace of change is we think about things as changing fast today. I kind of think in the future, we might look back on this and see that it actually got faster and there are more changes, and that pace of change, I believe, is going to continue to escalate. Some people use that observation to claim that we're nearing a singularity. I don't know about that. I kind of doubt it. I'm kind of more optimistic that this pace of change will enable us to solve some of the big problems that we face: environmental health and sustainability and social justice. These are big challenges, but I think, I'm optimistic that we're up to it, and it's, the future of business to be the leaders that make those positive changes. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I think we're headed in a better direction, at least going in the right direction in many areas. So yeah, it'll be good to see. So I want to end with one more question, and that is, if you were to make one prediction about the future of technology or business, what would that prediction be?
Well, that's a hard one, Lisa. I think no matter what I say, I'm going to be wrong. So maybe that's my prediction, that I will be wrong, and we will have to react differently than we thought we would. I do really believe that the pace of change is continuing to escalate, and some of the things that we kind of take for granted now are going to be, big deals in the future. So sorry, I'm kind of like giving you a non-answer there, but I know that it'll be recorded for posterity. So whatever I say is going to be wrong, and being flexible and adaptable and being willing to, go back to the beginning and try something new is always going to be a valuable skill and in demand.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, you know what? I actually do have one more question, because you've talked about codifying things or writing things down a couple of times. How have you gone about actually doing that? So I think that people have workshops and they do all kinds of things like this, but what have you found has sort of worked for getting those goals and those values down on paper and having people actually embrace those?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a lot easier said than done. It's certainly easier at the beginning than it is downstream. But in either case, you're not starting from whole cloth. If you have even a small organization who even just meets informally on, evenings and weekends, or if you have a small startup that's got its seed funding and you're working on your first MVP, it is true that you have a set of core values. You have a cultural mandate and reality. So it's more a matter of, bringing that truth to light than it is like starting with what do we want to be, and setting a goal. It's more like, this is who we are, how we got here, and why we're doing what we're doing is the truth of the organization. And so I think it's really important to build that from the ground up, but also to continually refine it and simplify it and try and get to the pinnacle truth. The core values should be things that never change. They're fundamental to who you are as people, as an organization. The world around you will continue to evolve and change, but these are the guardrails. These are the truths that we have as, as holy, the things that really make a difference and matter to us. And so it's a process of, elucidating everyone's opinions, getting it all out, maybe putting it on a whiteboard with a whole bunch of stickies. You can do this in a facilitated seminar if you have a big group. But the ultimate goal is to refine it down to a very small subset of very concisely worded statements that the vast majority of the organization says, yeah, I believe. And not everyone is going to buy into every detail.
Yeah.
But part of, the mission is that, by and large, for the most part, we all agree that this is who we are and what we want to do.
Yeah. Well, great. thank you so much for being here and taking time to share your wisdom with us.
Well,
It's
thank you,
been,
Lisa. Thank you
yeah,
very much. I've appreciated it very much.
it's been really inspiring. So thank you. And hopefully we'll have you back again. And next time I'll hold your feet to the fire on the prediction. So you better be ready.
Okay, great. I'll look forward to that.
Thanks, Scott.
Cheers.